Hello, everybody, and welcome, welcome, welcome. Tracy and I are so excited to be celebrating this part of Cybersecurity Awareness Month with all of you and with this panel and our fantastic students. You guys have no idea how much fun we're about to have talking to all of them and hearing about the kinds of work that they're doing. I'll be helping to moderate alongside Tracy. Give me just a second and I will introduce her. I am Dr. Donna Kidwell. I'm our acting CIO, but I have, for the past few years, been Chief Information Security Officer and Digital Trust Officer, and really firmly devoted and committed and so excited about the world of cybersecurity. So I can't wait for the themes that we're going to be talking. We've got 5 panelists that are coming today, visiting with you both from McMaster and from the University of Toronto. So it's really exciting to kind of see our students from across the campuses gathering together. And we're going to be looking at this year's theme, because every year there's a theme, and it's an international community that celebrates cybersecurity awareness. This month's theme is really focused on generations. So you're going to hear that as a thread as we go. I think we're going to start with some, brief introductions. And I'll start just by introducing my co-moderator, Tracy. Hey, Tracy.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's so fun to hang out with colleagues from University of Toronto. I'm over in Hamilton.
Yeah, so you're the inaugural Director of Information Security Services at MAC.
I am. It's been 4 years. I can't believe it. So when I joined MAC 4 years ago, it was the first time.
So you joined their AVP and CTO leadership team, but you come to that with what, 25 years of public sector experience, including roles at Mohawk College, and then, all sorts of illustrious things that you've done in cybersecurity. I love your voice as a woman and really thinking about inclusion. So much of the fantastic work that you've done in that space. You've been promoting STEM. So it's just so great to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
I'll hand you the mic.
Okay. Sorry, a little bit of a cold. But thank you for inviting me here today. And as Donna mentioned, I joined McMaster 4 years ago. It was as the inaugural director. It seems strange to think that you're going to have an inaugural director, because cybersecurity has been on all of our minds in organizations for many years. At McMaster, it was a growing area. And in the last 4 years, we've implemented this great roadmap to advance cybersecurity. And Cybersecurity Awareness Month is such a critical part of that. And having the conversations with our staff, student, faculty, and researchers across our institutions. So thank you so much for having me. These partnerships are really important because we do have students that go and study in multiple institutions across Canada. And it's great seeing how we can bring folks together. So thank you for having me here today.
No, it's great to have you here. As I've mentioned, I'm Donna Kidwell. I came from Arizona State University, where I'd spent about 6 years, not only leading up cybersecurity and digital trust, but really looking at technology as a transformation agent across the university. Some really exciting work happening at all of our institutions around how we think about artificial intelligence, how we prepare both our students and our staff and our librarians and our researchers for that world. It's been a lot of fun to really think through what those models need to look for and towards for us to drive a future. And that really is kind of the place where I'm the most passionate, thinking about what are the capabilities that we're seeing in front of us, especially students. You guys are working on the cutting edge and learning these incredible things that we're capable of doing. So how do we not only learn that, but then bring those into our environments and make our environments even smarter? Students are here. Tracy, you want to welcome our students?
Sure. Thank you all for coming today. I'm very excited that we have a group of students coming here from both University of Toronto and many different programs, as you'll see on the introduction slide, as well as a student who's working with us directly as a co-op right now from McMaster. So maybe I'll get everybody to, each of you to say your name. So I'll go to Tyler first. If you want to just quickly say hello, your name, your program.
Oh, hi, I'm Tyler Cong. I am a computer science at the University of Toronto.
Thank you. And Dre?
Hello, I am Dre, Mental Health Studies at U of T.
Wow, that's exciting. William?
Hi, I'm Will, and I'm in computer engineering at U of T.
Thank you, Will. And Zara?
Hi, my name is Zara. So I'm studying CCIT and psychology at U of T, and I'm really excited to be here, part of this event. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And Tim?
Hey everyone, my name is Tim and I'm doing computer engineering here at McMaster. I'm glad to be here.
That's great. And it's so exciting as you've gone through your introductions. I'm just reflecting on the diverse backgrounds and academic programs that you're coming from. And we'll unfold that a little bit more as we carry on in the conversation. I see Donna, you did post it. Yeah, shout out to let us know where you're from. So for those that have joined us on the call today, if you want to pop in the chat where you're from and what program you're in, that's awesome too. It's a community, and I'm seeing the numbers growing. This is exciting. So back over to you, Donna.
Yeah, Tracy, I agree. I love the diversity that that all of you have in the backgrounds that you've brought. And I'm kind of curious, Tracy, what was your undergrad? What did you study as an undergrad?
Well, that's interesting. I'm a political scientist. So came up through Western, University of Western Ontario, political science and public admin. Then I went off to Concordia and did my master's in public policy, public admin, and specialized in qualitative, quantitative research. So it was way back in the day around evidence-based decision making. It's a thing today, but it wasn't really a thing then.
Yeah.
And I've and really got into cybersecurity doing forensic auditing in the province of Ontario. So when those criminals were trying to do wrongdoing against government, that I was part of a team or led a team that built a forensic practice, and that involved cybersecurity and technology, looking at people and processes, working with law enforcement agencies. So I said, when I grow up, if I could do one thing, I'd be in cybersecurity, and I now have the privilege in the last 8 years now to have really focused in on cybersecurity. And that's exciting because, as I've learned, and I heard from another senior leader earlier in my career, is you can have a career with multiple different facets and you can do all sorts of different things. So it's been true in my case, and it's been a lot of fun being able to really dig deep into cybersecurity.
I think that's fascinating. And I really love the expression of so many divergent paths that lead into cybersecurity. If you think of the very first CISO roles that were maybe 25 years ago, which means it's a pretty young space, right? We've only had chief executives in the role for about 25 years. It's really amazing to think through where folks come from coming into this. I myself am a history major. Hey, shout out at the chat. Tell us your background and where you're from and what you led you here, because I'd love to read those and hear from everybody in the audience. But I, as a history major, was definitely interested in technology, definitely interested in the history of how technology was influencing society and culture and impact. So would have had those in the late 80s as things I was pre World Wide Web. And then, of course, when technology really started capturing everybody's imagination, I gravitated into that. Cyber is one of those spaces where you get these incredibly powerful and amazing tools to help actually people do the things they need to do. So my route into cyber was really through understanding identity. I'm trying to understand, how do we make sure that the right people have the right access to the right things? And that's really the work that fueled and passion where I'm going. So as we go through these students, since we've got quite a diversity of backgrounds, some of you interested in mental health, some in psychology, some more technical. Let's not worry too much and join in if you want to share some of those stories along the way. But Tracy, I think you had the first question today for our students.
I do, absolutely, and excited to ask. And do encourage the panelists too, if you want to pop stuff into the chats as we go through the questions. So we're going to work our way through. And my first question, and Zara, I'm going to go to you first to kick us off. So your first generation that were totally immersed in technology from the moment you've entered this beautiful world. unlike myself and Donna, who technology emerged as we grew up. And so do you find that you feel yourself a little bit more savvy sort of in the technology space when you see security threats? Or do you at times feel like they're getting pretty sophisticated and tripping you up too?
Thank you, Tracy. I think it's definitely helps being exposed to technology ever since we were little, and just being able to be aware of the cybersecurity space. I think it does help us kind of just be aware of the different threats and different, there's so many like different scams going on online. I know from personal experience, I used to work at the bank. So we used to have a lot of customers come in with fraudulent transactions going on in their accounts. And it was really interesting to see how many people are able to fall into those traps, whether it's being threatened through like ransomware, things like that. It's really interesting to see like how it is really easy to kind of fall into those traps, especially now. I feel like those traps are a lot more easy to kind of be convinced by them. But I think it definitely does make it a little bit easier to just be aware of technology. So the more you are aware of it, the easier it is to kind of avoid those different scams and those different tactics.
That's exciting to hear. And you worked in the bank too, so you must have quite an interesting perspective, seeing what was going on for the customers at the bank and you as an employee at the bank and a student, and looking at it, maybe considering what does that mean if for others in their day-to-day job,
Sure.
or as a student or a researcher or somebody involved in academic programs.
I think it was definitely a different side just because the financial side of things, it's a lot more risky to be falling into those traps because you have your money on the line and things like that. So it was our job would be to kind of inform the customer as to how to keep away from those tactics.
Well, that's great. Well, I'm going to ask the same question of Dre. Tell me about your thoughts from growing up with technology and technology today. Do you feel it's been helpful to be able to identify and manage the threat actor activity, the scams and spoofs that are out there? Or do you also at times feel like they're getting pretty good and good at trying to trick you?
Yeah, it is a cat and mouse chase indeed nowadays, where I think people have, in general, like most people have done their best efforts into trying to defend from these attackers. But then, like, I really want to look back and see like how things have changed, of like how susceptible people are and how gullible people are when it comes to scams. Especially like you install weird software, especially I did when I was a kid, right? But also even people that are criminals, they do people that are criminals, they tend to also have these things where, oh, I want my gadget so that I hide the illegal activities that I'm doing, even though it's actually not protecting them at all. It's just hiding things. And there are things that, like, at a security standpoint, that you might think, okay, like these things are actually not that, they're actually not helpful at all. They actually don't help you, especially when people are really, really getting good at defending things, and or even really good at attacking you. And it really helps a lot, especially as part of the generation that was like, it was not really that available, and then it kind of blew up. It really it really helped because you see how things have progressed, and some things that have regressed as well, where people have started turning into like some of the older tricks in the trade. But yeah, I would say it has definitely improved a lot over the years.
Well, that's great. Thank you. And yeah, I do hear that sometimes, or that it's regressing, and sometimes threat actors are going to old school tools because we're getting better at protecting against the new school stuff. So they're trying old school stuff that we don't pay attention to necessarily. And they're thinking, well, let's try different tactics. So I'm going to pass over to you, Donna, for the next question.
Yeah, and I love this conversation. I think, and the point you just raised, Tracy, is a really good one, especially on something like a campus. we have, because of the nature of science and research and how science and research is funded, like we may have amazing projects that got their funding, back 20 years ago, and are still producing amazing results, still giving us incredible data. Just imagine that we've actually got, I don't know, equipment on the moon and on Mars. You can't easily patch something that you've actually deployed into space. And so it's completely different thinking about older technology and how we think about that. And of course, our threat actors totally understand how to exploit the older technology, find those mechanisms in ways that we're not anticipating. So it's really fascinating challenge. So I think that means that we've got to figure out ways that we learn from one another and communities where we're all coming together to understand as quickly as possible and see what those opportunities are. So I'm kind of curious, students, like, are there specific places? Are there like social media platforms where you guys are the most active? What are the channels where you're learning about cybersecurity and how to actually get in? Like who right now is talking about things like RSA encryption and what we just learned this week that the Chinese researchers are cracking, or watching what's happening with the Internet Archive and getting hit by a DDoS and now getting hit with an API management exploit? Like, where do you guys find out about these kinds of things? Tyler, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, there are two pathways that I generally see people coming from. I kind of stand in between both. So the first one is through classes. Some universities offer cybersecurity courses, some a little bit more in depth than others, and sometimes we see people coming in through that. And then a lot of the times, especially with CTFs and just people learning cybersecurity through that, I find that it's often through word of mouth. So personally for myself, I was somewhat interested in it in first year, and then essentially one of my friends asked me if I wanted to play, and that's how I got into it, and that's how I see a lot
Tyler,
of
I'm going
people
to
getting
stop
into
you.
things.
Our audience might not know what a CTF is.
Oh, okay. So a CTF is something called a capture the flag challenge, where essentially the organizers will make a few cybersecurity challenges, almost like puzzles, that essentially are given to the competitors to solve. And I find that a lot of the people who get really interested into cybersecurity are very interested in solving puzzles or solving something in a unique or creative way. And that's how I think a lot of people get into CTFs. Just their friend lets them know, hey, do you want to play this? And they say, okay, sure, I'll join. And then some people get hooked and go really far into it and learn so much from it.
I love that, Tyler. And I think you're right. I'm kind of curious, and I'll ask in the chat, like, who is attending that finds themselves really interested in puzzles or board games or other kinds of challenge-based CTF type activities. Where do you go to learn?
So me personally, I definitely agree with Tyler. I think word of mouth is a really big way to learn about things going on in the cybersecurity space, especially when it's people in the same workplace with similar interests as you. Regarding social media platforms, I think as a student, I really use Instagram a lot more, and I'm aware of things going around in the community through that platform more than others. Like personally, Facebook and things like that, a little out of date, unless it's for specific things like looking for textbooks, things like that. It's very like niche perspective from there. But yeah, I think mainly Instagram as a social media platform, otherwise word of mouth to learn more about things like that.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. Oh, we've got Tim. What you got, Tim?
Yeah, just to add on to that, a platform that I use a lot to just keep updated is podcasts on Spotify. You have some really good ones out there right now. For example, Risky Business, they upload weekly or bi-weekly. I just recently got into it, and they do an amazing job just keeping you updated on security events happening at at the current state of security. And another good one would be .NET Diaries.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They do an amazing job explaining different scenarios and incidences, pretty well depth. So yeah, that's another way I personally keep up to date and just understand what's going on in the space. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And podcasts are such a unique mechanism too, right? Because you can listen to them almost anywhere, but in the process of doing it, you kind of get to know them, which is really lovely. It's not like you actually get to interact with them so much, although sometimes, but you really get a sense of who they are as a podcasting team and what they're interested in. Very cool. Very cool.
I think I'm up next.
You are.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of Darknet Diaries, so I love that. And do love the podcasting because then you can listen to that while you're doing other things. Whether you're driving a car, going for a walk, doing the dishes, whatever the case is. And it's great to see in the chat that people are continuing to share with the background and where they came from. And that's for the next question is, you see Donna and I come from a varied background. We didn't maybe come up through taking computer science courses, and in the profession we are looking for such a diverse background of people who can help us with some of the education programs, getting out there talking to some of our stakeholders when they're resolving a ticket. Let's say if their account gets compromised, or they're dealing with an MFA issue with their multi-factor authentication token. And so what we often see or hear is maybe there's a thought that the only way into cybersecurity is through a computer science program, or there are grad certificates in cybersecurity, but the only way to in is if you've come through a very traditional, let's call it, or technical path. And I'd be interested in your thoughts. And Tim, I'm going to ask you the question. From your perspective as a student and what you hear out there, or even for yourself, what led you into this field, and are there things that we could be doing or getting the message out to people maybe who are in a different kind of academic program, of a path into cybersecurity?
Okay. Yeah. I'd agree with the fact that a lot of people perceive that cybersecurity, which I think is true, predominantly you see cybersecurity filled with a lot of computer science graduates. And I think there are a couple of reasons for this. One being a lot of computer science programs early on expose students to a lot of security concepts through a variety of different courses. So they get exposure and they develop skills through what they study, which is pretty big advantage. And this ends up also giving them priority when it comes to cybersecurity electives, getting access to technical cybersecurity clubs, even being part of competitions. If you are a computer science student, you're most likely to be picked for competition. But that's not the only way. But yeah, you're most likely going to be prioritized. Another thing I thought of was people normally associate cybersecurity with only technical skills like coding, networking, system administration, and a variety of other skills. But and because of that, people have this misconception that the only way to get into cybersecurity is through a degree in computer science, because you learn these skills in a computer science program, which is not the case. There's a lot of online tools and resources you can use to get educated and learn a lot. And yeah, that's what I think. That's why I think computer science is predominantly what's assumed to be a core requirement to get into cybersecurity. Me personally, getting into cybersecurity just felt intriguing. It's more of a newer field of interest for me, so I'm still developing a lot. I have a long way to go, and but yeah, I think just like the fact of solving puzzles, and I'm a big board game fan, and just solving issues and figuring out that okay, there's always a vulnerability, and prioritizing what we can do with the situation we have and mitigating it as much as possible. It's just pretty intriguing to me. And yeah, did I answer the question?
Yes, that's great.
Yeah.
And I understand you have a leadership role at McMaster around board gaming. You want to tell us about that?
Right. Yeah, so I lead the Board Game Societies Club here at McMaster. It's a pretty interesting concept. Every week we have about 40 to 50 people show up, and we have 50 plus board games. So people just come and take a board game. And if they ever need help, we have execs that help out and explain the game and sit them through how it works. So I guess I've gained a lot of experience from that, just explaining concepts. And I've seen it kind of translate to my current role. For example, we recently ran a tabletop incident response game called Backdoors and Breaches. And yes, it was really fun, and I was able to explain to the team how it works, and I was able to host the session for them. So that was very, very fun, and I loved the experience. And I think from my experience at board games, it kind of helped being able to explain a concept to complete newbies. Yeah.
That's awesome. And thank you. That's awesome. So I'm going to go back over to you, Donna, for the next question.
Well, now I'm thinking next year we need to up the ante here and actually have a tournament, which means we need to have like competing teams going into Cybersecurity Awareness Month with their backdoor and breaches games, and then our winning teams can have a playoff. It is such a brilliantly designed game. And those guys have done a podcast too. They're not quite as frequent because they run a cybersecurity company. But I definitely think that the Black Hill Security folks are worth catching and learning about. Speaking of which, I'm kind of curious, like what kind of, it's such an experiential thing, what you're doing with the board games and tabletops. Like a really good tabletop is a really experiential experience. So I wonder, how could universities support those kind of experiential learning opportunities? And what do you think of, I don't know, integrating activities like the Capture the Flag that you mentioned a little bit, Tyler, but then actually bringing that into the academic experience? Tyler, from your CTF stuff, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's actually a great question for me, especially because we have a cybersecurity course here at U of T that I am a teaching assistant for. And every week we actually end up running 2 CTF challenges for students, and that is essentially their homework. And I think that it's a great thing because it lets people learn really hands-on. So in our course, we cover cryptography, then network attacks, and then we spend the last about 4 weeks covering binary exploitation and web exploitation. But I think we can expand a little bit more. So for example, ASU has 3 CTF courses. They have their introduction course, they have a system security course, and then they have a applied vulnerability research course, which I think is great. And then I know that UTM used to have a digital forensics course, which is something that we didn't cover in our cybersecurity course here. In fact, they actually had 2 of these courses, and they were only offered between 2015 to 2019 since the professor left. But I think it would be great if we could get more courses like this into the curriculum, and even just as electives, because I found that there was quite a bit of interest for this course, and just for these courses in general, because people really seem to enjoy this idea of solving puzzles for their homework.
Yeah, I think that's so much fun. And I'm really curious in ways that, as Tracy and I both lead up teams that are doing information security for our campuses. So figuring out ways that the folks on our teams could be engaging with you too, to bring kind of the practical reality. And in some ways, we're fighting those battles on the campus in a way that would be really fun to engage with the folks that are doing the CTF work. But Tim, you've got thoughts on this over at Mac too, right?
I do, yes. I'm working with my boss currently to maybe plan out a club that we could run here at McMaster. I'm kind of surprised that we don't have anything yet, but it is a work in progress. And we'd want to run CTFs and just have a space where people in the profession can like discuss and understand what's going on and just have a conversation. Because as you guys mentioned, a good way we stay on top of things is through just a discussion with others. So that is the idea of the club, and it would be pretty cool to start it running by next semester. Yeah.
I think that's great. This is a space where, Tracy, I'm going to take this away as a challenge for you and I. We're starting to see what we're maybe 7 or 8 years into, 7 or 8 years into universities understanding better how to compete in esports. We're really trying to figure out, how do we cultivate teams on our campuses that are leaning into these to be able to then compete with one another? So maybe that's something you and I should be keeping an eye on, Tracy. Get our
I
clubs.
love it.
I think you've got the next question too.
Yeah, and I love it. I love the competition and so many ideas of how we can also, as leaders in cybersecurity and higher ed, help support clubs and communities and CTFs and the board games. I got to play one time at a conference, and it really helps and it sticks. I think those are the tricks, it's something that sticks. So for this question, I'm going to cover two parts of it. There's, I know for the panel, we've been sharing the questions, and you've answered a lot about how to get involved, and you've been getting involved in podcasts and CTFs. What I'd love to hear is, and I'm going to go to Will, I'm going to put you on the spot first, is what makes you passionate about cybersecurity, and any challenges that you see or you've confronted to think about your career path or getting a job in cybersecurity. So what are you passionate about, and what gets you excited in cybersecurity? And as you think about getting a job, what concerns you? What challenges do you foresee?
Yeah. So for me personally, like everybody, I do love solving puzzles. And like my sort of favorite part of cybersecurity is how you have a system in front of you, and it's designed not with the intent of being vulnerable, but if you're on the offensive side of cybersecurity, you sort of have to think outside of the box and just keep trying and trying harder until you can find a vulnerability. And then after you find that vulnerability, you're essentially thinking like an attacker, but at the same time, you're reporting these vulnerabilities and you're helping make the cyberspace a much safer place. So that's my favorite part about cybersecurity. In terms of challenges that I've seen other students face, uh, Tyler sort of covered this, but it's also about how like courses sort of don't really teach the practical side of cybersecurity, especially if you want to get into a more technical role in the cybersecurity field, such as like penetration testing, for example. Um, a lot of universities, like for example, at UTSG, which is the St. George campus, we also do have a security course. But a lot of the training they give you during that course is actually just like purely theoretical, even when they're covering stuff like vulnerabilities. And then your exams are just like on pen and paper. But in the real world, you're never going to be doing things on pen and paper. You have to have the practical aspect of and the practical experience of actually uncovering these vulnerabilities and exploiting them. So, what I think is that it's the same issue with like computer science students when they want to get like an internship or something. Like their courses are mainly teaching them theoretical things, but they have to do other stuff outside of school, like side projects, for example, or going to hackathons. But with cybersecurity, it's sort of like a more niche field in the sense where like if you can't really do many side projects if you don't have experience with cybersecurity already. So that's why what I truly recommend is just like joining in these capture the flag competitions. There's so many like beginner friendly ones that'll just teach you the basic techniques of like exploiting a vulnerability, or even if you're into the blue side of things, forensic analysis. It's all 100% completely practical. And even if you're a complete beginner, there's usually write-ups after the competition or live demos on how to solve the challenges. So you can learn even if you're unable to solve such challenges.
Well, that's fantastic. And thanks for sharing some suggestions of how to go about getting some of that practical experience, getting your hands in there and learning and trying. Dre, over to you. I'd like to hear your thoughts too of, your passion for cybersecurity and also your perspective on any of the challenges from stepping from your academic program into the career field.
Yeah. My passion for computers in general and like hacking has been like quite hidden for quite a while, and ever since I was young, like I kind of have this feeling that I want to break it things and like know how things work and bend them to my will, right? And unfortunately, like I haven't really like pursued it like immediately after that. Um, but I like people say like it's never too late, and so uh, I did my grind, right. I studied a lot, and which is also pretty difficult for someone that is like outside of the field initially. So as you may already know, I'm in mental health studies. I mainly study courses in psychology, uh, and it's quite there is a little bit of overlap because cybersecurity is in cybersecurity the weakest link is mainly like the best point of weakness, and that weakest link is humans. And psychology really tackles on that. But my interest is outside of that. I grew up knowing that my godfather was involved in writing some malware back in the old days. And now I'm mainly doing reverse engineering and some binary exploitation. And what I found actually is that because I sometimes teach students at their younger years, like helping them understand concepts when in their first ventures in computer science, is that uh, people really do not have much like I wouldn't really say care, but like they're not putting as much time as I think they should be putting for something that that they should be passionate about. And that's something that strikes me a lot. Um and sure there are there could be real reasons as to why people cannot do such things, but I would say if you want to get into cybersecurity, I have met a lot of people that are like really good malware researchers, really good vulnerability researchers, and they have dedicated their time uh, to hone their craft, starting like when they were very young, right? And now I was like, and that got me thinking, like, how do we make uh, these people that have just gotten to university like, just because they're just out of right, no previous experience in computer science or cybersecurity, like how do we get them up to speed? And what I realized is that it really just takes hard work. And the good thing about cybersecurity and computers in general is that it is a very deterministic system, right? You feed your computer one thing, it will give out the same thing almost every single time, right? And that's really useful because the people need feedback and they just need to keep doing this. So in order for them to learn, right? Um, and and yeah, like I think need to focus on the fact that they get immediate feedback from the systems that they're interacting with. Um, and they should learn a lot from it.
That's great. And you've got a personal connection. That it's always fascinating just to hear the thing that happened or that connection that inspired someone. And it's great to hear you're also looking at the human dynamic side of things, because I think that's really important. And love to stay tuned and hear more as you evolve in your career yeah, about the human side of things. So I'm going to pass back to Donna for the next question.
I think one more question and then we'll break into a Q&A. So if folks have questions or if the students that are here had something that we talk about that you want to circle back on, definitely. So for our last question, before we go into the Q&A, I'm really curious about the Capture the Flag clubs. I'm curious about how they got started, how you organize them. Will, can you share with us a little bit more about what you're doing with the CTF club?
Yeah. So Tyler had already described previously what capture the flags are. And so our community is mainly focused on playing CTFs. So we do play those every week. So I would say that is the main event that we do. But in general, we're just a huge community of cybersecurity enthusiasts and people who just love anything related to security, whether it's like the privacy sector of it, cryptography, offensive security, etc. So aside from playing these competitions, we also do like to attend these conferences, such as like the Toronto Area Security Clash or Task. And we also host some of our own workshops where we teach students some cybersecurity techniques. For example, we're hosting a workshop this Wednesday on lattice cryptography. And then we also wanted to have a workshop later in the year about large language models and how they can be exploited. And we also do have a main event that we do every single year. It started in 2022, and then it started in 2023, and we've made it our own inaugural Capture the Flag event, which we host as an international competition with prizes. So that is happening in January of this year, and it'll have challenges for anybody who's a beginner, and then also for more advanced challenges for anybody who's more experienced in the field. So we're also hoping that we can probably have like a student division just for the students at U of T to compete in and hopefully win some prizes for them as well.
I love that, Will. And I'm really curious to see how you guys approach AI red teaming and the work that you're thinking about with the LLM games. That's a space where I think it's really nascent even inside of corporate environments. I've seen one university that pulled together an AI red team, essentially or maybe you want to do a purple team. Kind of depends on where you're at, right? But I think that's a really interesting idea because, to Dre's point, it's a very deterministic world. Our LLMs are bringing in this very interesting, far more generational. It's a whole different ballgame, and thinking through how to actually what our adversaries might be thinking of and how they might use them. How to even, how do we think about in our own environments as our own research and efforts are pushing more towards developing LLMs? What are the kinds of things that we might want to be doing to help ourselves be able to use them wisely? So we probably want mechanisms by which we could be thinking about ethics, about bias, surfacing some of those issues and bringing together code libraries of different types of models to help us actually combat those, but making those public and part of the community. There's some really interesting opportunities there. So we're going to shift into Q&A, which means we can take questions from our audience, or we can also take questions from inside of our own teams if there are things that we've talked about that you think are worth double clicking on.
I want to thank Maddie in the chat. There's some great resources. So Maddie posted some great resources in the chat. Also, Sue McClashin, you've posted some great stuff about Black Hat sector going on this week. So that's great too. So as we go through that, if there are as well other resources, and William, you've shared a few, please go ahead and share.
You might have a question from Greg. Hey, Greg.
Hello, greetings from Hamilton and McMaster, Ontario. Well, Donna, I want to rise to the occasion and take that challenge on a CTF competition with or against U of T. I think this little friendly competition can go far. I'm wondering from the CTF team, because we don't have a CTF team at McMaster yet, do you have any words of advice or words of wisdom on where to start out and what pitfalls to look for early on when starting up such a community? Thank you.
Yeah, so I can answer that. I say the way most CTF teams start is just with a group of friends who are interested in it, and then they play some competitions, and then they invite some more friends. So that's sort of how our club started. It wasn't like a huge thing at the start. I actually wasn't there for its conception, but I was invited by one of the members who was playing. And one of the common pitfalls I see is people join into these capture the flag events, and then they don't know how to solve anything. And then they end up getting discouraged because it's like a 24-hour or 48-hour event. And then they spend so much time researching and failing to solve anything. But actually, that failure is what makes you good at CTFs, because you have to try so many things, and then when you're eventually unable to solve it, that's what the post competition is for. People will post their solutions and their write-ups to the competition, and then you can go back and retry those challenges and then take some notes about how to solve them. And then for the next competition, when you see a similar challenge, boom, you'll be able to solve it.
Thank you. And are there any competitions you recommend we start out on? Something maybe that we will get a little bit of traction on?
Yeah, so there are some beginner-friendly ones. Notably, there's one called Pico CTF, which is a competition and then also a training platform, which is called Pico Gym, which is just an archive of all of the old challenges. So that's more tailored for like high schoolers. So the difficulty is pretty beginner level, and that's actually how I learned most of my CTF ability at the start. I just went through all the Pico Gym challenges. Also, there is an event called CyberSci. I'm not sure if you heard of it, but they invite teams from a bunch of universities to come compete in a mostly beginner level CTF. And then there's like sponsors there and also employers who will give the top teams interviews. And you can basically go in there, solve some challenges, and then maybe walk out with a job interview or a job itself. So it's great. And I think if you're a university, you should definitely look into trying to apply to CyberSci and create a team.
I see a question in the chat. Okay, so from Sue, we talked a lot about hard skills. How do we help
Can
people
talk
with?
up to it, Tracy.
Oh, go ahead, Sue. Go for it.
Yeah, I just popped it into the chat because that way people can see it. But like Will and the others here, Tim and Tyler, etc., doing great job. I love this discussion of CTF. I don't see that number of young women in this audience. For me, one of the problems with CTF and the hard skills is we drive them away. So another challenge we have is bringing women in. Now, we've got Tracy and Donna and their background, totally outside information security initially. And yet look where they are. So a couple of things. How do you think students, we encourage more diversity? Because it can be really, really tough for a woman to be the only one in the room. Not as bad as it used to be. That's one point. And then just what are your ideas on how to make people so aware of the leadership? I love the hard stuff. I'm sorry I didn't do more of it, but we also need the soft skills.
So ideas on that? How do we make sure that we're bringing more folks to our tables to actually engage with us?
I could maybe start off and then move on to Tim for sure. For me personally, I'm not a computer science student or like in that extremely technical field. I'm communication technology. So I have more of like the creative side, more psychology, so more of the psychology side of things. I had an interest in this based on my first internship. I just kind of applied for a communications role and ended up being in the cybersecurity field. And just being interacting with people in this kind of space with these interests relevant to cybersecurity, technology, that really made me intrigued into this area as well. And this led to my current work study position with the information security team. So I think just kind of going for different opportunities, even if it's something that you might not be fully aware of, or you're not too like exposed to it already, just trying different things, trying new things, and you never know where that could lead.
Thank you.
Yeah, I could add on a bit more to that. I believe hosting events like the one we are attending right now is an amazing way of bringing awareness to the multidisciplinary aspect of cybersecurity. We see people from mental health and people who are not necessarily from like computer science or computer engineering in this call, part of the panel. And this can encourage people to know that there is a potential for me to also pursue this degree. Another thing I was thinking of, like university should allow students from other disciplines to have access to electives and maybe even have a minor where they could get into cybersecurity. But that's, yeah, it's a big commitment, but that is something universities could do to make it a bit more open to other disciplines as well.
I love both of those. And I hear in that also a challenge for our employers, in terms of thinking about how are we thinking about those job postings? How are we describing these positions? How are we, as the folks that are actually doing the hiring, are we sending out signals that actually say that we're inclusive, that we're actually, I mean, frankly, of all the different spaces, cybersecurity, every morning you wake up and the adversaries have come up with a new way to do what they do. What we need are folks who can learn, who can solve puzzles, who can solve challenges, who are tenacious. Those are the skills we really need. And you'll find those skills in all sorts of different disciplines. And arguably, like, I am really, really interested. Let's say somebody came to me and their background was epidemiology. Is there something that we could learn about how viruses spread from someone who's deeply studied that? Of course there is. It's that diversity of folks that understand their own areas so deeply and then can bring that. If you're from a liberal arts, can you help us to find how the human story in this and how the impact works? That's what we need in risk professionals. Those of us who help really be able to articulate what it means when we get attacked, which is actually a really hard skill to do. What you got, Tracy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really important is all the skills are needed. We need people who have the computer science skills, the engineering, as I call them, the hardcore technical skills. And we need people who are educators, communicators, people who understand the behavioral dynamics. And having events like today, and also another person coined the phrase of, you need to see it to be it. So it's encouraging people, and I'm thrilled, Zara, you're out there. You're a role model for many people in the profession. And Tyler, William, Tim, and Dre, and the things that you're doing, and being, bringing people into teams, helping people understand that there's ways to get your foot in the proverbial door by, taking some beginner CTFs and trying those. I think all of that helps. Demystify how complicated, or you've got to be, just a computer science person to be in there. There's lots of ways into the profession. So coming from today's conversation, just encourage you to keep the conversations going and keep encouraging people to maybe join a team or get involved in some way. And I'll do a handoff to Dre.
Yeah, I just wanted to make 3 comments on the matter. Is that one, I am very, very all for inclusivity and equity in the field. I think we really need more like a diverse breed of people in the entire field, because different people can mean either different targets, and for example, you might want to look into how Filipinos are vulnerable. For example, I know that Filipinos are very, very into Facebook instead of Instagram and things like that, right? Women as well, right? What do women really go to? Like, what sites do they visit, and what are their preferences when it comes to buying things? And so it's a very important thing to note that sometimes people can have different preferences depending on where they're from, and that might be something that we might want to look into. The second point is that soft skills are a very big indicator of success in almost any field, including cybersecurity. And I would say I've had an internship in vulnerability research, which is a very, very hard skill type of job. And I was with a diverse group, right? I've had like a woman in my boss is a woman. I've had a fellow intern as well who is a woman, even one who is transgender. But one thing that is in common with these people is that they can talk, they can communicate, right? And we have established that understanding from week 1. And I think what sets people apart a lot is that from people who can be successful in the field to people who are not so well known, is that the people who are really well known and can have greater success are the people who can communicate. And that's really important. And the third part is that, like, if you're someone who has soft skills, there's this thing that came into my mind. I went to DEF CON this year, and there in DEF CON they have this thing called Policy at DEF CON. And I realized that policy making is a very arduous process because it is very dangerous if you put out a policy out there and it gets abused. And turns out that cybersecurity is also like, and the hacking culture is very, very helpful into like determining what are the weak points of a policy. And they've been doing that for years now. And I think that's also a good way to get started because it really helps you think out of the box.
Great, what a fun observation. I think you're exactly right. It's in the practice of policy where we actually see whether or not we're protecting and whether or not we're creating things that reduce the friction towards us being able to get out more innovative and wonderful solutions. But it is its own art for sure. I thought I saw Maddie's hand up for a bit there. Maddie? I'm calling her
Oh,
out.
I don't think we have enough time. I was just gonna to say something really quickly about the kind of like outreach and campaign we've been having across the tri-campus community, going to classes that are not technology focused. So that's one of the ways we did this. We did a bunch of presentations last year. I think we have a few this year as well. And that really piqued a lot of students' interest. We had a lot of us from InfoSec go out to talk. I think a few people from here did that as well. So just reaching out to those classes that are not only like comp sci, kind of focus or engineering, but just like generally. And a lot of people do get interested. Basically, like what Donna said, like if you're studying, like say biology, for example, like how does that tie into cybersecurity? Everything to me is tied into cybersecurity today. And so it's really important to be able to talk to people and communicate to them that connection. And maybe that's how we can kind of get their interest going on. Thanks.
I think that is our final question. So thank you, Maddie. That was actually a lovely way to kind of round out our Q&A. And here's some of the resources in addition to so many that are in the chat. We'll be sharing this with you in a variety of different ways, but I understand that these are clickable. So if you are watching this and want to run right out to see what's happening with our CTF efforts or what's happening this month with Cybersecurity Awareness Month at MAC or here, by all means, go check out the links here. Our next event is going to be a fireside chat where I'm going to be meeting with the amazing Kate Giovacchini from ASU, who's doing some really fantastic groundbreaking work, thinking about trust technologies and the future of some really, really incredible identity work that sets the foundation for students actually being able to not only have more agency, but to really own their own data and their own identities. So if you're interested in digital identity, if you're interested in the future of where those technologies can take us, definitely join us back for a conversation with Kate. Tracy, anything that you want to share before we head out for the rest of the day?
Just huge thank you, everybody. Great resources, and in addition to the ones that were here. And let's keep the conversation going. So in whatever way you can, wherever you are in your walk of life and what you're doing, if you can keep the conversation going, that would be fabulous. And look forward to seeing you all again at some other time.
Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a fantastic remainder of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Thanks so much to all of our students for joining us. Really appreciate your being here on a Monday, especially a gorgeous Monday. Our next step should all be getting out and enjoying this incredible weather and color.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.